The majority of us go through the educational system and life and never learn what's right for us. Maybe it's time for you to create your own definition of success. And that's where we come in. This is the SUCCESSology podcast, here to supplement the traditional education system and life with real-world skills and knowledge, helping you create your own definition of success. SUCCESSology. Here's your host, Rajdeep Singh.
Hi everyone, it's lovely to have you on the show. Now today on the show we have Mark Metry with us. Mark is the author of Screw Being Shy, host of Humans 2.0, which is a global top 100 podcast, and has been featured on Amazon Prime's docuseries The Social Movement. Now, even though he is only 23 years old, he wishes to do his best during his limited time here on planet Earth. Mark states that, and I quote, "Everything I do from the moment I wake up till I go to sleep is ingrained with moving humanity forward. Religious obedience towards the truth and love, and for the overall betterment of every random individual around the world." Now, without further ado, let's start the show.
Hi, Mark. It's lovely to have you on the show.
Dude, it's a pleasure for me to be on this platform that you've been starting, and yeah, man, can't wait to be on here in a year from now when your podcast is a lot bigger.
Well, let's hope so. And it's all about I was speaking to Hala about this as well. Because for her, she was like an overnight success, but only she knows how much effort and hustle she sort of put in behind Young and Profiting. Yeah. So
yeah, man, Hella's literally such a hustler, man. Like when I met her at an event, she's like one of the smartest people I've ever met. Like she's probably, out of all the interviews I've done, she's probably someone who did the most amount of research, the amount of care that she puts into it, her hustles back in Disney. I'm pretty sure she still works there. Yeah, I mean, she's definitely not an overnight success. She's just a boss overall.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I read your book, Screw Being Shy. So that's a lovely book.
Nice.
And, it covers the main topic is social anxiety, which is one of the most sort of common forms of anxiety, and it can easily lead to sort of substance abuse and social isolation. And both of which can sort of lead to depression and suicide. Now, I've done my research and I've sort of learned that, it's not easy for you to share your story, but it's just such an inspirational story about your transformation and how, you went from being socially anxious to now having a podcast that's in like top 100 globally. So, I mean, if it's not too much trouble, can we sort of go through your journey?
Sure. Yeah, of course, man. So I was born in 1997. So I'm 23 years old right now. And I'm the son of immigrants from, my parents came from Egypt, and they won the green card and they came to America, to the East Coast. And I just remember having a very kind of like basic childhood, nothing too crazy happening. I remember as a kid, like moving all the time, moving to different towns, different apartments whenever my dad would, or my parents would get a better job. So yeah, I mean, that's what I remember, pretty basic. I think now when I look back at my story, the real time that really began to really affect me in the deepest of ways was, when I was a young person going into like third grade as a kid. I remember we moved out of the inner city where there's a lot of people, and there's people that look like all different kinds of people, from Latinos to Middle Easterns to Black people to everyone. And we ended up moving to like this super small town. And the small town had like 5,000 people in it. It was very much like a rural small town area. And the really unique part about this place was that, there were a lot of nice people, but this town was also extremely racist. And, one of the biggest things was there was no racial diversity. And so I remember just like going to this new environment, going to this new place where all of a sudden nobody looked like me. All of a sudden, every single person was white. And it was maybe about me and like one other person in like the entire school who looked different. And so also at that time, this was post 9/11 in America. And so if you lived in America kind of post 9/11, if you were any sort of Middle Eastern Arab, that's really where people were extremely racist to Middle Easterns. And so I remember just being a kid and being put in this new environment. And then all of a sudden people are hating me because of the color of my skin. And so I got a tremendous amount of racism, and really that began to create the stage for me to just like I just almost like automatically, without even me realizing, was just like put in this mentality where all of a sudden I just wanted to run away from the world. I didn't want to show up for who I was. I didn't want to try. I didn't want to have fun. My mentality just became, I should just put my head down and just not look at anybody because everybody hates me. And so I became, that kid that never talked. I didn't have any friends. I would always sit in the back of the classroom. I wouldn't really do any activities or be a part of anything that interested me because it required to speak with other people. And I could never talk to anybody. And every time, I felt like I needed to talk throughout my life, like even up to when I was like 18 years old, I just felt like my brain was holding me back. And so, that for me was a massive part of my story. And then, the way that this played out in the world was, I had no friends. And so what did I do? I just played video games. And then I also, at that time, the internet was sort of becoming more mainstream. And so I remember working this one summer job, saving up enough money, buying an iPhone, and then starting to literally freelance from my phone, getting enough money, buying a laptop, a mini netbook. And then what I began to do was I did all sorts of things. I started YouTube channels. I learned how to code. When the iPhone came out, I learned how to code, code apps for the iPhone. I just began to do all these things. Sometimes I would sell these services to make money for myself. And then by the time I was like 15, 16 years old, I became pretty financially successful. One of my little ventures that I had created made me a decent amount of money. And I started making six figures, hundreds of thousands of dollars at a young age.
Wow.
And then that slowly the reason why I mentioned that in my story is because that is a time where I slowly began to realize that success is not what I have been led to. I was always taught in my head, and the mentality that I had was like, hey, Mark, once you get out of school, you graduate, you get good grades, and then you get a job, and then, you get enough money and you can buy a house and you can get married and get a dog, then you'll be happy. And so I kind of reached to a spot where I was like, wait, I have all the money that I could ever wish for in my life at that time, and I'm still not happy. I'm still the same loser. And so that really, I would say triggered this really interesting anxiety and depressed stage in my life for a couple years, until I basically went off to college and I was 18 years old, where I fell into an even darker time in my life where I really started to abuse food and alcohol and drugs. And next thing I know, I gained a decent amount of weight and I'm obese. I become depressed seriously for the first time in my life. And, sort of my lifelong social anxiety that I always had transformed into social isolation, which then led me to literally being suicidal for a period of time. And so, when I was 18, I kind of hit like rock bottom, and I had no idea who I was. And I was just trying to escape the pain and trying to find who I was and what success was. And so, ever since then, it's been a gradual process of days and nights and weeks and months and years of, completely changing my life, completely changing my brain. And then, going on to start different kinds of businesses and podcasts and books and all the stuff that I'm doing now. So, man, that's the story.
Man, I'm so glad that you said it. The one thing that I want to point out is success is not what, everyone sort of thinks it is. We've been taught by the education system and even society that success is, you going to the best schools and colleges and then, getting the best job and then getting married, having kids, and then sort of finally retiring. But life is so much more than that, and that's the one of the major themes of our venture as well. And another thing, even though I'm sorry that you went through it, but I'm glad that you did, because it made you the person you are today.
Dude, I can't even tell you how grateful I am, man. Because the truth is that I see other people who are in my situation who are 23 years old and are successful. And I can just tell that they're in the same exact phase that I was in when I was like 16, 17, and I wanted to prove the world wrong. And you just see it like on people's Instagrams. They post pictures with different kinds of cars and different kinds of girls and then different kinds of parties. And it's just like, I'm so glad that I went through that and I became successful already. And then I kind of lost myself, because that's truly taught me. And like, that's why I'm a 23-year-old out here that's making a book about mental health. Like, that's why I talk about this stuff, because it's just the most important stuff for me to get out there. And if it wasn't for this, I probably wouldn't even be talking at all. Like I said, like, my story, like, I don't really like to talk about myself, but I know I'm willing to do it because I know that it can help other people, because it has. Because it's crazy. Like, I'm at a point in my life where I get emails frequently of people telling me that they were going to commit suicide, and then they read my book or they listened to this podcast episode that I did, and it changed their lives. So, that's why I do it, man. So success, failure, whatever. At the end of the day, it's just about like making sure that you feel comfortable in your own skin. And I never felt like that, and I know how bad of a place that is to be.
True. And again, everyone should know that this is a gradual process. There's no quick fix. So, and especially with the current circumstances, if you are at rock bottom, as cheesy as this sounds, there's nowhere to go but up. So if you're struggling with things, I think it's a mindset. So as soon as you sort of encounter a problem, start looking for a solution. And if you can get that mindset, your life becomes so much easier.
Yeah, for sure, man. But the truth is that one of the quotes that I heard that really changed the way I look about life from a long-term perspective is, you have all of the problems that you need for your ego to exist. And when you really look at it from that perspective, it's just like, everyone is born on this planet, and we're here to go through like this reality maker. And we have to learn the lessons in due time that is literally going to help us be ourselves. Forget the money, but, I spent 18 years of my life not being myself. That's like one of the most painful things that, a lot of people are in. And so I literally had to learn that lesson every single day of my life for then me to be able to do what I'm doing now and appear and show to the world that I am myself, and I'm not afraid of whoever says what, or whatever kind of criticism, or whether my brain wants me to think I'm a perfectionist, or I'm going to mess up, or people are going to hate me. I know it doesn't really matter. And so I know that I only know that because I've gone through that lesson every single day and suffered as a result of it for over a decade. And so everyone is exactly where they're supposed to be. And the truth is like, the moment you realize that is the moment where you truly begin to let go. Because I think a big part of this is like, I think people who face anxiety, depression, people who are at rock bottom, I think to a large degree, their ego is just so strong that they want to control life. They want to control everything about life. And like when you look at, for example, social anxiety is the incessant need to try to control your own social behaviors in the face of others because you're actually trying to manipulate other people in the situation to happen the way that you want it to and the way that it happened in your head. And so I think a lot of us who have anxiety and maybe at rock bottom, we're trying to control life too much. And one of the things that I learned like on my journey when I was outside walking in my city in the most dangerous part at night, hoping that somebody would walk up to me and shoot me or mug me and try to kill me, was literally the fact that I had to let go. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds woo-woo, but when you begin to realize like you're literally like, yo, I literally don't know what to do with my life. I'm literally at a spot where I'm so sick and tired of just being sick and tired. You need to flip the entire game on its head. Yeah. And it's only until you reach a realization like that, where you realize you have to let go, you realize that you have to surrender. You have to take like that inner critic, that ego that's never left you in your entire life, that's always trying to control everything you need to do, and you need to surrender to it. And it's only until you surrender to it is when then you start to create the space, you start to create the open opportunity needed for you to start creating, for you to start making things, because that's the only way that you start to find yourself, because you literally have to create yourself. But if you're in a situation where you're trying to control everything, then you're never going to be able to create. You're always going to be on the defense. And so I found with a lot of us, especially if you're at this level of rock bottom, it means that your ego is too big. And your ego is too big because it's trying to control everything in your life. And so you need to surrender. You need to give up. And you know, for anyone who's been through a scenario similar to what I'm talking about, you know exactly what I'm speaking on. But for some other people who haven't, you know, this may be a little bit difficult to grasp. But I don't know if that made sense or not.
No, it did. It's extremely insightful because personally speaking, I haven't gone through something that serious, but I know someone close to me that has. And when they listen to this particular episode and this particular segment, it's really going to make sense to them. And I hope it helps them. So, you know, as I sort of mentioned, you know, anxiety disorders are kind of extremely common, right? And just to put that into perspective, say, according to the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, 40 million adults, which is about 18.1% of the population, suffers from social anxiety. Now, you know, despite it being highly treatable, only 36.9% of those suffering actually go and receive the treatment. Now, I kind of reckon this is due to people confusing sort of social anxiety with, say, being an introvert or being shy as a personality trait. So is that true, or is there a distinction? And secondly, is there a way by which individuals can sort of tell the difference between them?
This is a great question. So, you know, here's what I would say. I would say first and foremost, you know, we need to make a differentiation between like mental health in general and then a mental illness. And so basically, every human on planet Earth has quote unquote mental health. Mental health is not something that you have or you don't have. If you have a brain, if you have a mind, then you have a same capacity for mental health, in the same way that if you have a body, you have a capacity for physical health, for taking care of your body. And so that's one thing that needs to get addressed, because a lot of people in our world today, they think you either have mental health problems or you don't, but that's not the way it works. The way a mental illness works is, generally speaking, there are definitely exceptions. Generally speaking, what a mental illness is your brain being subjected to behaviors that are toxic, to patterns that are very poor mentally, where what happens is maybe in 5-10 years of doing those, then maybe you do have a mental illness a decade from now, 2 decades from now. And this is why, like, for example, I'm so glad I went through what I went through, because I got a sign very early from life that said, dude, you better take care of your physical health. You better take care of your mental health. Because I know if my body, if my brain didn't have these certain reactions, then I would probably be some 50-year-old who probably like drinks alcohol every day and thinks he's healthy. And then 5 years from then, I get dementia or I get Alzheimer's and my brain literally starts to wither away, which then makes me more anxiety prone. And so what I'm trying to say is that all humans have anxiety and depression at a normal spectrum. There are many different levels, from your genetics to your gut microbiome, to your environment, to your social environment, to your traumatic experiences, to how your brain works. There's many different factors, but everyone has a capacity for mental health. And the truth is if you don't address that, and if you don't at least do healthy things in a preventative way, then 10, 15 years from now, you may very well become depressed. You may very well become, have anxiety where you have it all the time and it's no longer in a natural cycle, the same way that every single human being experiences anxiety and moments of depression. And so that's one, first and foremost. And so when it comes to like the statistics that you laid out and why that is, I mean, is this. So if you don't have social anxiety, this may be hard to imagine, but if you have social anxiety, there's no way you're going to talk to somebody about your mental health. Like it's almost impossible. Mm-hmm. And the truth is depending on the culture, whether you're from Asia or you're from India or you're from the Middle East, and even America too, there's still a stigma around talking about these things, just generally speaking, about mental health, about anxiety. If you go to like a lot of different countries, like I know I'm from Egypt, a lot of people from Egypt just straight up think that anxiety doesn't exist. It's not real. And that's because they're literally living in it 24/7 and it's actually controlling their lives, but they don't know. And so that's a major thing to understand, because that's going to prevent people from speaking up about it, already on top of them having social anxiety, which is literally a mental health condition that convinces you to not talk to the world. Mm-hmm. And so that's like one of the most straightforward things. And that's actually why, that's like the biggest reason why I wrote this book, because I realized that people who have social anxiety, who need the most amount of help, they're probably not going to seek out, mainstream solutions in our society like therapy or going to a doctor or calling a suicide hotline, because mm-hmm. that requires talking to somebody, versus reading a book, versus listening to a podcast. Uh-huh. No, it's not the same thing. It's totally different. And so I think that's a big factor. And then in terms of what you said about like the people confusing it as a personality trait, I think that is exactly what happens when you start to have a mental illness. And so social anxiety is a mental illness. Like that's what happened to me, of where you are plunged into these cycles for decades, for many years. And then that becomes sort of the automatic thought and energy and behavior that you have basically for the rest of your life. And so this is so common because what happens is people really do become their sort of personality, their identity. I remember every single day of my life, or not every day of my life, but very frequently I was just called the quiet kid. Yeah. Or the shy kid, or not the kid, or the kid who's like smart, or the kid who's like a reader, even though I wasn't smart and I wasn't a reader. And so I think a lot of people have that. And what happens is if you don't know who you are, you just take the labels, the titles from other people, and you live within those labels. They become yours. And so I think this is very much true in terms of like, like someone who has sort of a traumatic experience that enables them to have social anxiety, mm-hmm. and they don't really know who they are because they're a kid and they're growing, mm-hmm. become the identity of becoming a shy person. And the truth is this happens in our lives with all sorts of things. It's not just being shy. This happens, like, for example, someone has a traumatic experience and their coping mechanism is food. And so they eat, they binge eat, and they're obese. They become overweight. And then what happens is they begin to look at themselves like who they are as a fat person, as an obese person, when in reality they're not. And then what happens is this goes on for 10 years and it literally becomes who they are. And so you see this across so many different things, and it really just has to go back to your identity, to how you think about yourself. And the truth is like, you know, Will Smith, he has a great way to think about this. He says that throughout our lives, we're like picking up these identities and we're trying them on. And we're like, oh, does this fit? Oh, does this fit? Oh, does this fit? However, the issue is when it comes to mental health, you may not only realize that until like 10 years from now. And then when you do realize it, you can't really change it because it's hard, because you try to do it, but then you just don't get the results. And so people give up and they're like, hey, this is the way I am forever. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question, but that's the way that I think about it.
You've been listening to the SUCCESSology podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you like the show, make sure to leave a review on Apple Podcast and share it with a friend. That would help too. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with Raj on his personal LinkedIn at Rajdeep Singh, on Instagram at Rajdeep.1997, on Instagram at SUCCESSology.podcast, and on YouTube at SUCCESSology Podcast, helping you create your own definition of success. Make your own path to get there quicker. Until next time, this is the SUCCESSology Podcast signing off.